If you had a teacher who told you there's no such thing as a dumb question, I have to disagree. I think there is a lot of merit in the idea that there is no such thing as a dumb question, because that gets you to question more. And it is good to question, even if it's dumb, because hopefully by asking the question you can become a little bit smarter. But what I mean when I say that there is such a thing as a dumb question is that some questions, or rather all of them, have hidden information built into them. They have ideas in them. A question is not purely a question. A question is a framing device. If I tell you, if I ask you a question, have you stopped beating your wife? That's a question. It's a yes or no answer. But if you answer yes, you're saying that at some point in the past you did beat your wife. And if you say no, then you still are. So by saying yes or no, no matter what you answer there, yes or no, you're assenting to an idea that was baked into the question. And you can do this with a lot of other questions. For instance, in religious literature, you find a lot of this. In the New Testament, there are a lot of questions that are asked of Jesus Christ that have ideas baked into them. And Jesus is very good at identifying what the assumption is and referring to that rather than to the content of the question. For instance, he's walking with his disciples one day and runs into a guy who was born blind. And one of the disciples, he wants to know about metaphysics, he wants to know about reality, he wants to know about justice, he wants to know about the kingdom of God. And so he asks, "Master, which man did sin, this man or his parents, that he was born blind?" There's an assumption baked into that question that the way someone is born blind is as a consequence of sin, either of that person in the premortal life or out of foreknowledge of what he was going to do, or the parents, and therefore there was a punishment on the child. And Jesus said, neither did this man sin nor his parents. And there is another purpose, there's another explanation that is completely outside of that frame for this man's blindness. You have other questions that had things baked into them, like false binaries. Every false binary, that whole class of fallacies, is based around the idea of constraining things a little too much with an assumption. Are you for us or against us? You're either for us or against us. I might just not care. There are other alternatives. On the other hand, just because there is an assumption baked into a question does not mean that that assumption is wrong. You could be right. Maybe you are for us or against us. Maybe you ask a question that is a very informed question, the kind of question that you ask to sound smart, the one where it has a lot of your knowledge kind of baked into it, so you can kind of show off that you know some things, so you can ask a detailed technical question. Or you can ask a detailed technical question humbly and still have a lot of assumptions that are correct baked into it, a lot of content in there. In Buddhism, there is a tradition of these kinds of questions. And there's a really neat concept in Japanese called mu, which is not yes, not no. It's an answer to a binary question which kind of dodges it. Basically says, ask a different question. And that framing I find to be so interesting. There's a famous koan, which are these little parables, these little thought-provoking stories in Buddhist tradition. And one of them says, "Master, does a dog have a Buddha nature?" And the master answers and says, "No." That concept, that there's something baked into that question that is so wrong that it's worth not even asking. Or another one, "Master, if I meet the Buddha, what should I do?" And the master replies, "Kill him." That koan is designed to get you to reimagine or question a lot of the assumptions that are baked into the initial question. That question had a lot of things to do with, veneration or respect for the mortal body, or the assumption that you could run into someone who was the Buddha and that he actually is the Buddha when he claims to be. I'm not sure exactly which one the master there intended, or maybe all of them, but highlighting that assumption and recognizing exactly what is being asked in that question is valuable. I just got out of a 9-hour day in the office working on deposition preparation. We're preparing to take the deposition of a doctor in a medical malpractice case. And in attorneys are very good at crafting questions. And they are generally in two different classes. You have direct examination and cross-examination. In direct examination, there are rules in court. Not in depositions exactly, but kind of. In court, you have no leading the witness. You can't ask questions that have anything baked into them unless that assumption, has already been established in the course of the court proceedings up to that point. You can't ask somebody, where do you work? You have to ask, do you have a job first? And once they say yes to that, then you can ask them, where do you work? No loading of any assumptions into a question unless you already have an answer, or that answer is supported. On the other hand, when you get to cross-examination, that's not a rule. You can totally ask leading questions. In fact, that's all you do is ask leading questions, where you can push things into the question and say, show those assumptions, find the crosses between them, try to get somebody to tie themselves up in their words. And there's an art to it. And you can push that art to the point where it becomes slimy, or you can just use it artfully and dangerously. And it's a thing. I find this frame of direct and cross-examination really useful when interacting with AI. In particular, there's a funny story. Here in Missouri, we had an attorney who got in a lot of trouble for using AI-generated case law. And the way that story worked in detail is hilarious. Or not hilarious, just dangerous. What was happening is AI research, legal research is really hard. It's really hard to find the case law, because just because you found a case that says exactly what you want it to say, you need to check and see if it's the most updated case that there is. And just because you haven't found one doesn't mean that there isn't one out there. It's almost like mining, where you could either be an inch from riches or a mile from nothing. And you don't know because you're still tunneling through the rock totally in the dark. And so this guy had a case, and it was the kind of issue that he thought, the courts have to have decided this. There has to be a case right on the money here. And based on his experience, he had some knowledge of what the contours of the law were, and he had an expectation of what he would be able to find. But he was using the free tools for legal research provided by his state bar association, and they aren't that great. So he wasn't able to find it. So he goes to ChatGPT, and in ChatGPT he asks, find me a case that says this. See the problem? There's an assumption baked into the question. The assumption is that there exists a case that says this, and it's just a matter of finding it. He did not ask, is there a case that says this? He said, find me one that said this. The AI did exactly what he asked it to do. It found him a case that said this, even though there wasn't one. It invented it. It hallucinated the whole thing and gave it in perfect citation format. And then this attorney relied on that, put it in a brief before the judge. And the opposite side was having a really hard time looking up this case that didn't exist because it didn't exist. And it was all because, is that real? Then, when he gets called out on this by the judge, the attorney goes back to ChatGPT to verify that the thing actually exists. And the way he asked that one was problematic too. He said, can you confirm for me that this case exists? I can't remember if that's the exact phrasing he used, but if I recall correctly, that was the gist of it. And, it confirmed. It did what it was asked. I find it very helpful in my own interactions with large language models to ask direct examination questions first. To ask very open, very general, not giving it a lot of indication of where I want it to go, what I'm hoping the answer will be. Not giving any indication of whether I think the answer is going to be a good thing or a bad thing, because you can load questions that way. Like, there's a difference between, did you strike somebody, or did you hit them, or did you slap them, or did you bump into them? All of those questions are kind of generally in the same vein. They're asking about a contact, but all of them are loaded with assumptions. In this case, it's a value judgment about whether the bump would be a good thing or a bad thing. And it will change the way the person answers, because they don't just respond to your question, they respond to the assumptions, including those value assumptions. So when asking the large language models, I will try to avoid content and also value assumptions. And then once we have a bunch of material loaded into the large language model's memory, and we've got kind of a neutral basis of information to work off of, Then I will aggressively switch to cross-examination questions, diving into, yes, but are you sure? Have you checked this assumption? I'm detecting an assumption here. Are you sure about this? Are you sure is kind of a dumb way to ask that. I would craft that question a little more carefully. Is this always the case? Is this sometimes the case? Are there any exceptions? Where are those exceptions? Those kinds of things. I find it very helpful. And, when you're asking your own questions, I find this to be a problem also in prayer. Like, when I ask questions in prayer, is this the person I should marry? That's a question a lot of people have asked in prayer. And I think it's kind of a problematic question because it makes some assumptions about soulmates and about supposed to and about your obligations toward God or to your calling. And, in my experience with my own prayers, God has been very hesitant to answer a lot of my questions. I felt hesitancy on the other side of the veil. Just ask a different question, ask a slightly different. And it's been really frustrating. There's been a lot of growth in trying to identify within myself, okay, where's my assumption? What am I baking into this question? What am I baking in as far as values go, or what is important or what is not, or what is real or what is not, or what is expected of me or what is not? My obligations and my relationships with other people and my capacities or lack thereof. My dad always said that, and says, that if you argue for your limitations, you can have them. And it's easy to ask questions that have limitations baked into them. And like any assumption, it can be warranted or not warranted. But like Socrates, I think that the unexamined life is less rich, it's less valuable. Socrates went as far as to say it is not worth living. And I'm not sure I would go that far because the unexamined life may become the examined life. But it is shallower and it is better to be able to see those assumptions. Can you ask dumb questions? Yes. Are you asking dumb questions now? Maybe. What does it mean? I hope you get some value from this video. If you did, please leave a comment in the comment section below. I'd love to hear some examples of dumb questions that you've heard, questions that have assumptions baked into them. If you got any insight from this video, please comment below. I'd love to hear what was valuable to you. And as always, thank you for watching.